At some point, I really started to despair because I had dieted. I had done so many programs, exercise programs, boot camps, and this kind of thing, and nothing really stuck. I tried 12-step programs. I went to an eating disorders therapist twice a week for a year. I was not a slouch. I was going for it. I was trying to get to the bottom of it. All the books, and nothing really worked for me long term. So I was getting to a point of despair. I remember thinking maybe I'm just like one of those people who will never lose weight and keep it off. That was sad for me to think like that.
Well, it's a real pleasure to have Tricia Nelson on the show today. Welcome.
Thank you for having me, Zora. It's great to be here. I'm really excited for our talk.
Yes, we haven't covered this topic yet of emotional eating, and you are the expert in this. You even have a TED Talk, and wow, you had so much information out there. And you do share your story out there, but I would love for you to briefly explain what was your journey like with emotional eating, and then how did it lead you to start Heal Your Hunger?
Totally. Yeah, this is very personal for me. So I think, an emotional eater from as far back as I can remember. Of course, I didn't know it at the time, but I sure knew that I loved food. So,
Well, who doesn't? I mean, it is kind of an emotional thing for everyone at
yeah.
some point, right?
Oh, yeah. No, it was emotional for me. I'm like, I love food. I love to eat. I love to cook. I love to go out to dinner. I love sugar and carbs and snacky foods. And so it was a love of mine, which would have been not so bad, except that I also gained weight very easily. So in my childhood, I was an overweight kid, and by age 21, I was 50 pounds overweight. So, and it bothered me. Like, it was a problem for me. No, some people, they're just heavier set and it's not a problem. It was a problem for me. And I had this roll in my tummy that I would scrunch up on my hands and imagine cutting off, like you cut fat off the side of a steak. And I'd think to myself, it's only fat, like this fat on the side of the steak. Maybe I could just cut it off. And thank God I didn't try that. But I had other crazy thoughts. Maybe I'll join the army because they'll force me to exercise at boot camp because I hated to exercise. Or then one time I thought, maybe I'll get a disease where I automatically drop weight. And so I was thinking the craziest thoughts, but it's really indicative of how like desperate I felt because of course I dieted and tried to lose weight. And of course I did lose weight. You go on a diet, you lose weight. Problem is I couldn't keep it off and I would put the weight back on and then some. And so it was a struggle. And I was a yo-yo dieter to the point where I had probably 5 sizes of pants in my closet because I would yo-yo a good 40, 50 pounds. Like I'd reach goal weight for 5 minutes and then I'd go back up the scale. So I never knew what weight I was going to be. So I had these different sizes just in case. And I always hold on to the hope that my skinny jeans would fit again. And so it was a pretty constant obsession, both my weight and then food, because I did love food. I did love to eat, but I didn't get to eat for free. I paid a price. So that's how it went for me. And at some point, I just really started to despair because I had dieted. I had done so many programs, exercise programs, boot camps, and this kind of thing, and nothing really stuck. I tried 12-step programs. I mean, I went to an eating disorders therapist twice a week for a year. I was not a slouch. I was going for it. I was trying to get to the bottom of it. All the books, and nothing really worked for me long term. So I was getting to a point of despair. And I remember thinking, maybe I'm just like one of those people who will never lose weight and keep it off. And that was sad for me to think like that. And I was really blessed to meet somebody at my point of despair. When the student is ready, the teacher appears. And I met a man who had been morbidly obese and had lost weight and kept it off for a long time. And he did it really through spiritual and emotional means, like from the inside out. And he became my mentor, and he started to really show me that food was not my issue, that it was a deeper issue, that I had to start living differently in order to eat differently. And that changed my life. Honestly, that man changed my life. He just passed this year. Sadly, he was a kindred spirit for sure. And what happened was he helped me heal, and then I started working with him to help others. And so for 30 years, we helped other people on their journeys of healing, not just food addiction, but other kinds of addictions as well. And I say food addiction because that's where I was. But we helped people who are emotional eaters, and we can talk about that distinction on this talk for sure. But anyway, that's what happened for me. And I started Heal Your Hunger about 8 years ago because he didn't really want to work with people online. He was very much a sit in my living room, I'll share this with you, one on one. And that is not a scalable model. Like, we are not going to help many people this way. And so I'm like, dude, we got to go online. And he was older and he couldn't jive with that. So I started Heal Your Hunger, and I codified the work that we did do in the living room with people and wrote my books, started my podcast. And from that point on, I mean, we've been helping women around the globe really heal their relationship with food, no matter what size they are, no matter where they are on the struggle bus. And it's just been such an incredible pleasure.
How fortunate you are to meet this person who completely turned things around for you when you've tried everything. And I'm guessing you were in your 20s and 30s going through this roller
Yep.
coaster, right?
Yep. Yeah, I literally was 21 when I asked him to help me. I was so lucky to be so young. I started my struggle of finding help early. And so I was incredibly blessed to have that moment of clarity at age 21. I can't keep dieting. I can't keep doing, because that's literally what I thought, Zora. I thought to myself, oh my God, it's the same pattern over and over. I had lost about 40 pounds at that time. And I started to overeat again. I was like on this strict food plan, weighing and measuring my food. And I was just starting to slip off of it after 9 months. And I just thought, I cannot do this for the next 80 years. Like this, I can't do this. There's got to be a better way. And that's, again, when that beautiful moment happened when I was introduced to somebody who could actually help me. So I consider myself incredibly blessed, and that I did ask him for help, and I did jump in with both feet, mentoring with him. And now I can bring his work effectively to the world. And it is such a pleasure.
If you've been trying things for a long time and you finally found him at 21, it means you were from a very young age struggling with the weight and
Yeah.
knowing that, or at least like you said, it bothered you, and maybe some girls it doesn't. And so that's really amazing that we were so proactive, because very often I think it's the teenage years or going to the college, the freshman five or whatever we have. Yeah. That's when it starts, and you already reached
Yeah.
like your end, right? By the time you went to, I don't know if you went to university or not.
Yeah, that was the freshman 30 for me, by the way. No, it's true. In high school is when I was starting. Well, I was blessed also because my oldest sister she struggled with weight as well. And she was in college, she put on a ton of weight. And she came home one day and announced that she was an emotional eater. This is back in the 80s. And she's like, I'm an emotional eater. And that's when that term really came out. I think Janine Roth was the one who coined it. And so she announced that. And I had issues with my sister. She was not a nice sister. And so I just thought, I derided everything she did and thought. And so I just thought to myself, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard of. Like emotional eating, like duh. And then it's the funny thing is though, is you can't unhear it the seed was planted. And after that, I started observing myself and I'm like, yeah, there is something off about how I relate with food. Like I would go with girlfriends to a sandwich shop or like a Denny's or Friendly's here in the US, and they would order a sandwich and it would come with fries. And I would observe that they would eat their sandwich and pick up their French fries. I, on the other hand, would sit there and be like, how could you leave a French fry on your plate? I would eat the fries. I'd dive into the fries and I'd pick up my sandwich. And I'm like, I am not the same as these people. And then they'd have a hot fudge sundae, right, for dessert. And then this is back when those the glass jars and the long spoon, right? So they have this hot fudge sundae. And halfway through the sundae, they push it away and they're like, oh, I'm full. And again, I'd be like, full? There's ice cream in that jar. What does full have to do with it? And so I started to realize I am not the same as all my girlfriends. And so that's when that emotional eating term started to have some real truth for me. And again, I couldn't unhear it. And that's when I realized it is like there is something off about how I relate with food. And that's when when you first start trying to deal with your weight issue, if you have a weight issue, you always do the diets. Let me cut back. Let me do this. Let me do that. But if it doesn't work for a period of time, or you have several sizes of pants in your closet, or you feel like you're on that yo-yo dieting cycle, you start to realize you have to do something else. And so my experiences and what happened for me is I started doing deeper things. Like I went to therapy and I went to 12-step programs and I started reading all these books on psychology. So it's really trying to figure it out, which is good. I mean, it's certainly closer, right? You're getting warm to a solution, but I really didn't find the solution for me, the solution, what worked for me until I did meet my mentor. Kind of pulled all those pieces together, the psychology, the emotional connection with food, and that kind of thing. So I'm definitely blessed. So thank you for, that's a long way of saying, you're right.
Also, an amazing story. And it's interesting how you observe. And yeah, when I think about it, I think my husband's an emotional eater now because what you described, he would never leave a French fry. He's French, but he looked at me like, how could you leave that? But then again, I see him leaving a piece of broccoli and I'm like, are you going to eat that? Because you can't leave that poor piece of broccoli. He has no problem leaving broccoli on the plate.
Yeah, that was me. That was totally me. Yeah, if it's carby and greasy or has sugar on it, that's mine.
Okay, I'm sending him to you. Oh, well, okay. So let's then, this term emotional eating, like you said, I didn't realize it was even in the 80s, but it's interesting. Yeah. What does your sister say to you now? Just out of curiosity. Does she like say, I told you so?
No, she doesn't even know that story, but she was on her own. Actually, to be honest, both my sisters were emotional eaters and were on their own healing journey. So we all relate with each other a lot, which is really comforting. It's really sweet. So, and they've both read my book and they applaud my work. They're really sweet and supportive.
Are they all sorted out now? I don't know what the term to say.
We're very similar in that we've all sought kind of deeper solution, like deeper spiritual, emotional ways of healing. I mean, a lot, and they're both therapists for one thing. So they became therapists and I do my own healing work I'm not a therapist, I'm a coach, but we all do that deep dive into our emotional life. And they're both meditators and one's a Sufi guide. So it's funny how the three of us have found our own paths to healing and they're on a healing journey around food and they're incredibly healthy. At some point, many years ago, like none of us really eat sugar and we're just really smart about our choices. And at some point, my mom started for Thanksgiving meals. She started making healthier Thanksgiving meals and didn't serve dessert. And she just totally got with the program. And and so we're really blessed. I mean, my sisters, they're healthy. I'm healthy. My she's healthy. Thank goodness. So we all caught it. We caught the bug and it just makes holiday gatherings so much easier for us.
You are blessed for sure. Yeah. I don't hear that story very often. People struggling with getting the body composition they want, whether that's emotional eating or just want to get in better shape. So that's a really beautiful story. So I'm glad I asked you.
Yeah.
So then let's talk about then the emotional eating and you mentioned food addiction. Is there a difference?
Yeah. So my experience, I've been working with people for 35 years who struggle with food. My experience is it's a spectrum. I feel like we're all hardwired to have an emotional connection with food. Otherwise, we would blow off eating, starting with breastfeeding. I mean, what a quintessential emotional experience that is, the bonding experience of a mother and a child during breastfeeding. It's awesome, right? And by the way, my sisters and I were not breastfed. So there might be a connection
Oh,
there.
interesting. None of you
Exactly.
were breastfed.
No, it wasn't the thing back when in the 60s when we were born. So it was like there was a trend, and my mother, she didn't breastfeed us. So there's probably something there, right? Around not really being getting that attachment, that spiritual emotional feeding, so to speak. But point is, when somebody is breastfed, they do have that beautiful fulfillment that comes from bonding with their mom, and vice versa. So that's an emotional experience. And I feel like everybody once in a while just wants comfort food. Like they just want to eat to feel better. I mean, my partner, who's totally not an emotional eater, his downfall is potato chips. Like he will finish the bag. So that's the one thing he'll go overboard on, but he's really not. Other than that, that will bring him comfort here and there. So I feel like we all can go there. And so that's why I feel like it's a spectrum. And what really qualifies where you end up on that spectrum is two things primarily. One is the level of control that you have. Like, can you pull back? Can you course correct? And the other is the number of consequences that you have. Like, is it really taking a toll? What's that toll like? How many areas of your life are affected? And so, to give you an example, think of going on a cruise, okay? You go on a cruise, it's all you can eat and drink, let's say. You've paid for it, and you're like, hey, I paid for this. Like, I got it coming to me. So you do. You enjoy the huge buffet that they have on cruises, and you drink wine, you eat the cheese, you definitely eat the desserts, and you come home from the cruise and your pants are tight. You've gained 5 pounds, and you're like, I feel gross. Somebody on the low end of the spectrum will have a good amount of control so that they'll be able to be like, okay, that's it. I'm going to be jogging an extra 10 miles this week. I'm going to add a mile and a half each day, and I'm going to cut out sweets. And within a couple weeks, they're back to that 5 pounds lighter, and their pants are feeling good again. That
Unless
is
you're in
somebody.
menopause.
Well,
Menopause may
yes,
be a different
exactly.
story.
Well, that's the
Yeah.
thing. That's what qualifies it. Control and consequences. So
Mm.
5 pounds is not a huge consequence, especially if you can take it off easily. But that was not me. Okay. I'm on the high end of the spectrum where if that happened to me, if I started that process of eating desserts and enjoying myself and drinking and all that, I might come home, feel gross, and then berate myself for having let myself go, and then felt gross in my pants. So I start wearing black stretchy yoga pants, and then I have no idea what weight I am, right? Because I can stretch in them. But there's sort of an emotional downfall that happens where I'm just sort of feeling gross, and then I eat more, which makes no sense. If you feel gross, you don't eat more to feel grosser. But I would. And I'd be like, oh man, I blew it. And then I just go with it. And before you know it, it's the 5 pounds is 15 pounds. And I can't get back on track. I'm like, oh, I was doing so good when I wanted to look good on the cruise. Like I wanted to look good on the cruise, so I was eating so healthy, but now I can't get back to that place. And some people, if they're like me, might be binge eaters, where once you've opened the door to eating ice cream and cookies many nights a week, you're taking the lid off the Ben and Jerry's and not putting the lid back on and doing some binge eating or sugar binging. And so that's somebody on the high end of the spectrum. And if you do that long enough, the consequences do add up. Your body will take a beating if you're on the roller coaster ride and gaining weight. Skin's getting saggy from the sugar because sugar erodes the elasticity in your skin. Obviously, the weight gain and loss will erode the elasticity in your skin. You might have gut issues from eating unhealthy processed foods. You might not be having sex because you don't want to be touched. You feel gross after binging, right? And so that's causing problems in your relationship. Your energy at work is down because you don't feel good the way you're feeding yourself, and you might be obsessed with food and you can't wait to take a break and go down to the lunchroom where, so and so's holiday party, the remnants from that are in the break room, and you want to go taste those cookies. It really does start to really take a toll, and so many, maybe depression, anxiety. I mean, there's so many ways that binging and and unhealthy eating pattern is causing harm in your life. And we don't think of it. We think, oh, it's just food. It's not a big deal, right? Everybody's doing it. So we rationalize it. But if you really do a stock taking of how are those food choices really affecting you, your energy, your health, your relationships, your get up and go, what you wear? I mean, let's talk cute clothes, like totally in the back of the closet. It's all black stretchy yoga pants. And so it really takes its toll. So that's somebody on the high end of the spectrum. That's more in the food addiction. When once you start eating sugar and processed carbs and you can't stop, like you just eat the whole bag or box, that's a sign of an addictive habit. When it's affecting your health, when your doctor tells you you're pre-diabetic and you keep eating sugar, it's like that. Those are signs of addiction.
Yeah, because
True
it doesn't make
addiction.
any logical sense. Like, you understand
Yeah.
logically what the problem is and how to fix it, but you can't control it. It's that loss of control, which is the problem. And not to mention, I mean, there's a whole gut brain connection here. We always talk about the gut brain axis, but
Yeah.
there is the brain controlling what's going on in the gut. And then the gut, imagine the more you feed it sugar, the more microbes that you are building, asking for
Yes.
sugar, sending the signal to the brain to ask for sugar. So it's done out of your control completely. On a physiological level, I can understand more the biological aspect, and you can understand the emotional and the mental
Yeah,
aspect that's going on. And
totally.
and it's just it's vicious circle. If it sounds where you start and you stop, you start and you stop. Maybe you go on a diet and then you go. But so that's one end of the spectrum. And then what's the other end?
Well, the other end is food addiction. I mean, or that was the
That's
high end of the spectrum. The low end of the spectrum is you do it once in a while and there's no big consequence, right? That you can course
okay.
correct. So that's the low end. And the high end is it's really impacting your life.
So is emotional eating all of that? So like you
So,
said,
so here's the thing. I'm a food addict. I had bad sugar binges. And so I considered myself a food addict. I'm not binging anymore by the grace of God, but I still it's sort of like the 12-steppy once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. It's sort of like you're not cured, but you can be living in a healed life and freedom. I kind of subscribe to that because I could go back there to that dark place. Like I know I could if I stop doing the things I teach people to do. I have to walk my talk because I'm not cured. And relapsing is no bueno. Like it hurts, especially when you've lived in freedom and you go back, you slide back, it's worse. Because better.
I
So my experience is that emotional food addiction is on the high end of the spectrum, and that is emotional eating just taken to a greater degree. So I feel like everybody is an emotional eater. If you're a food addict, you're an emotional eater. But somebody who's just a mild emotional eater is not necessarily a food addict. So it only goes one way. And I do have a quiz on my website, a free quiz that will tell somebody exactly where they are on that spectrum.
Oh, that's great. I'll put that link
Yeah.
in the show notes. I was listening to, I don't know where it was, but a long time ago, a drug addict who was talking about their addictions, and they were a food addict as well. And that person said, it is way harder to quit from a food addiction than a drug addiction because it's
Sure.
everywhere and you need to eat. Like
Yeah.
you don't need drugs, and you can remove yourself from that, I guess, where they sell it or where you get it from, but you cannot escape food. And that's why you said, this is why it's so much harder to break this addiction.
100%. You have to take your deadly addiction out of the refrigerator or from the cupboard 3 times a day. I often say it's like taking a tiger out of the cage, and like you have to pet the nice little kitty. You have to pet it and be nice to it, and then somehow get it back in the cage without getting your ass torn off. That's not so easy.
That is hard. So, so this is really interesting. I really want to know what your guru told you, and that in the sense, and what you're teaching, and what they said, and like, how do you get over this, the emotional eating aspect? And but before I do, I do want to go and dive into a little bit into the menopause section, because you mentioned to me off camera that most of the women you are working with are in their 40s, 50s, and 60s
Yes, and 70s.
and 70s.
Yep.
Incredible. 70s and still, I mean, imagine this started when they were younger. Now it doesn't.
Oh yeah. When I do free classes online, I always ask, I'm like, how long have you been struggling with this? And women will literally say 50 years.
Oh my goodness. That
Actually, some people sometimes even say
torture.
60 years. And one of my coaches in my program is 80 years old, and she was a lifetime member in Weight Watchers, and it never helped her. She did OA, she did all these different things until she came to my program and she was able to really heal. And now she's a coach in my program. But yeah, I mean, first of all, the diet culture was so harmful to us. So in the 80s, in the 70s and 80s, we were so off. Like it was so harsh and restrictive and hard to follow, like hard to stay on a plan. So it's the culture has changed, but we had implanted in our brain, for instance, that fat is bad for you and the Pritikin diet, like you shouldn't be eating fat, clear fats out. Well, now we know that's BS. Like your brain needs fat, your body needs good, healthy fats, obviously, in order to operate properly. So we've had to change that. We had no idea how bad sugar was for us. And so and even now, when somebody knows they need to be gluten free, they're buying gluten free products that are packed with sugar. And so the whole sugar, the sugar train, that's a whole nother conversation. But point is, the people who are older had that diet mentality and tried dieting for so long. Emotional eating wasn't a concept that was introduced yet. And so it really did harm because their idea of weight loss is restriction, is like deprivation, and is failed attempts. These people have been literally dieting for 50 years or 40, 30, whatever. And the thing is, when somebody is approaching the problem from a physical standpoint and they're clearing out the sugar and carbs. They're taking away all their favorite foods and trying to eat salads and cottage cheese. And then when you go on a diet, you have to go off the diet. Like it's come off of it at some point. So then they come off and then it's a free for all and then they're putting the weight back on. So the yo-yoing, the up and down and up and down. The problem with any kind of diet is it's focused on the physical only. I mean, truthfully, that's the problem with the diet, the GLP-1 drugs right now. And I'm not against them per se, except if somebody's just doing that, which they are. People who are struggling with weight want a quick fix because it sucks so bad to gain weight. What drives me every day, Zara, what gets me out of bed, trying to carry this message to women who struggle is that I've been 50 pounds overweight. I've had my legs chafe at the beach with the salt water and my legs rubbing together. I've been fat. It sucks. It sucks worse than anything. I've been where I didn't want my body to be touched. Like I want a special someone in my life, but I don't really want to have sex because it is embarrassing and shameful for me to be seen naked. And so there's so many ways that it hurts to be overweight. So I understand people wanting a quick fix. When your house is on fire, you want to put that fire out. And so people will always say like, oh, I know it's not about the food, but give me the diet anyway, or give me the drug anyway, because they just want the pain of being overweight to stop or being out of control with food to stop. So it's really important to know that if we just do the physical and we're trying to eat better, but we have the craving for sugar and carbs for the real food we want. First of all, that is not a sustainable place to be. Like you can restrict for a little while, but if you still want that food, the food that really makes us unhealthy, that's an unsustainable place to be. But the other thing is, for somebody who's an emotional eater, we are eating to feel better. If somebody's going through menopause or really on that emotional struggle bus, they want to feel better. And so they're eating for comfort. They're eating to elevate their mood. And it works. Like it works. Like, eating a brownie makes you feel good. Like, let's be clear. So the problem is, though, so we emotionally eat. And then when you take those foods away because you're trying to eat healthy, but you haven't dealt with what's making you feel bad in the first place, right? Like, why are you needing the comfort in the first place? Why are you so emotionally hooked in with the food? If you don't deal with that, you will be going back up the scale. And that's true for people taking drugs right now. GLP-1s is that you either have to stay on the medication forever or you better find a new way of being. And people don't think of that new way of being to address their emotional connection with food. And that to me, that's so where it's at because that's really what's driving us to go back to the food time and time again. That's what's driving us to go back up the scale is that we are emotionally connected to that food. And I want to share with you something that I love to share because I think it'll help people who might be thinking as they listen to us, I'm not an emotional eater. I don't do, that's crazy. Like I did, right? When I heard it. And the thing is, we know what food is doing to us, right? We know if we're eating chips every day or chocolate chips every day and ice cream, we know it's hurting us, right? We're intelligent women. Like we know it's not good for us. We know it's not good for our gut, whatever. So we know what it's doing to us. But in order to pivot and understand the emotional eating conversation, I want to introduce to you what it might be doing for us because there is a payoff. We're eating for something more than just it tastes good or I just like food. And so what I call it is the PEP test. And PEP is an acronym, PEP. And this is a way to just start understanding what the underlying emotions may be. So, and it's very simplified. There are many emotions, right, that we might be eating over, but to put them in little buckets, the first P stands for painkiller. So we eat to kill pain, like to numb, right? We want to numb our pain. What kind of pain? Any kind of pain. To me, life serves up plenty of pain. My mom was diagnosed with Alzheimer's recently. That is painful. That's painful, right? A dysregulated kid, that's painful, right? Or a kid who's getting bullied, that's painful. A relationship that's on the rocks, that's painful. A bill you didn't plan on, that's painful, right? So it's like emotions can just feel ouchy to us, like, ouch, I can't deal. And when we feel that way, the food softens the edges. Like it numbs us to the point where it doesn't feel as painful. So that's food, using food as a painkiller. And it totally works. And that's usually why we are drawn to carbs and sugar, processed carbs, ultra processed carbs, because they kill the pain. Our first inclination is not to reach for a salad, right?
No.
It
What
doesn't
about
work.
stress eating? Somebody's you're having a horrible fighting or conversation, and you got your hand putting in whatever it is in your mouth, and it's a stress response, right? I mean, and
Totally.
that's
So
probably a
let me,
painkiller as well, no?
yes, absolutely. And the next letter, E in PEP, is escape. So we use food as a form of escape. And what are we trying to escape? My experience is as overeaters, we're also overthinkers. And this can happen with menopause too, right? And perimenopause is that our minds are racing and we are overthinking everything. What did she mean by that? Why didn't they include me? What's going on there? And or we made a mistake and we're beating ourselves up over and over and over again for a stupid mistake. We already apologize, but we can't let it go. So we overthink. And of course, when we're overthinking, we're not overthinking about all the wonderful possibilities in our life. Like we're thinking about the worst case scenario, where I like to call it awfulizing. Like everything is like the worst case scenario. I'm going to become a bag lady and live on the street. Like my business is going to go up in flames. So we think negative thoughts. And the point is, we're trying to escape our own brain. Our brain is very active, overactive, and it's skewing negative. And when you get your chips and your ice cream and you sit in front of the TV and you binge watch your favorite TV show, you're trying to just get relief from your own mind. And so to me, and sort of like fear. You can sum it up as like fearful thoughts. So we're trying to escape fearful thoughts or overthinking or just exhaustive thinking. I mean, I don't know about you, but I don't know if you relate to overthinking, but for instance, my partner will be like, are you still thinking? I'll bring something up from 3 days ago, some situation I was in that he already helped me with. We already talked about it, found a solution, whatever. I took care of it, sent the email. And then 3 days later, I bring it up again. I'm like, because I've thought about it some more. And he's like, are you still thinking about that? I'm like, yeah, because it's how my brain works. So the
Yeah.
point is, that's what we want to escape is we just want to break. And the last P, and well, by the way, so the stress, like you, that might be stress also. Like we're stressed out and the overthinking is stressful, right? And then having too much on our plate because overeaters are also overdoers. Like we're the ones to give the project to because we're going to get it done in lightning speed. So we tend to be overdoers and we pack our schedule, right? There's no time for self-care. And so that's leading to our need for to escape also because we're just doing too much. And by the way, we do that in part so that we don't feel, so we don't notice what our brain is doing. And so that's definitely part of the problem where we do create a lot of our stress. I mean, you can't help what's happening in your life, parents that need care or whatever, you can't help that, but you can change how you think about it. And so again, overthinkers tend to overthink everything. And so how we think about things is a lot of where that stress comes from. But I just want to close the loop on the PEP. And the last P stands for punishment, so we use food as a form of punishment. And this does seem somewhat counterintuitive because I'm like, no, I'm eating to as a reward because we use food as a reward. Like I've had a hard week. I've been knocking myself out. I get to eat this. Like I get to get my favorite chocolate and sit in front of my favorite TV show. And so we eat as a reward for sure. But if you consider if you are somebody who goes overboard, like I was, and you eat more than you intended, you actually finish off the whole bag of chocolate, and then you feel bad and gross and stuffed, and then you don't want inflamed, your body's inflamed from the sugar, and you don't want to get together with your girlfriends the next day because your face is showing the bloat, right? You're feeling inflamed and bloated. That's not necessarily just a reward. Like there's a built-in punishment there. And my experience is we're also like in that overthinking, there's also some overfeeling. Okay, so emotional eaters tend to feel guilty more than your average person. Okay, like we carry the weight of something, we overthink it, we chew on it, but we also just feel guilty a lot. Like for things we're not guilty for, or things we are guilty for, but we can't let it go. Like maybe we were bitchy or we snapped, right? Because when we're feeling bad about our food choices, we can be really crabby. And we can offload on other people and not be very nice to be around. But we take it so, like we beat ourselves up mercilessly over our mistakes. And so food has a built-in punishment where we can literally sabotage our health, sabotage our weight loss that we're working on or whatever. And so that PEP, painkiller, escape, and punishment, I just offer that to people listening because at first when you're like, I'm not an emotional eater, as you go to the refrigerator when you're not really hungry, you can ask yourself, am I feeling uncomfortable about something and want to numb that feeling out? Or am I overthinking something and want relief from my own brain? Or am I feeling bad about something and I'm actually sabotaging myself right now? Like my good streak, am I all of a sudden sabotaging that? And so that I call it a PEP test. Take the PEP test, like just find out what's going on. So it's sort of a beginning way of thinking about the emotional motivations around our food choices when it just seems at first like, no, I just like it.
Mhm. I can see how this can even spiral out of control as you're going through this menopause transition because without the progesterone, for example, we tend to overthink whether you have an addiction or you don't. It's just the way the hormones
Yes.
are. So we take
Yes.
progesterone, try to control that a bit. And then you have more insulin resistance. I mean, even that's a physiological thing. Imagine
Yeah.
if you already had the emotional trauma that comes with all of this. Well, then that can of worms probably just opens right up again as you're going. Maybe even if you had things under control, I can see it coming back again during menopause, right?
Totally. When you're knocked off center by your emotions and by the hormone changes, we eat to feel better. Like when we feel crappy and we haven't figured it out, like what supplement do I need? What hormone do I need to supplement with? We can just sort of turn to food. It's accessible, it's right there, and it works. It works to make us feel better. And then, of course, we're gaining weight more than we used to, right? That those snacks are costing us more. And that just exacerbates the problem, makes us feel worse. And it is a vicious cycle for sure.
Hmm. So yeah, and then I'm wondering how. I'm sure you don't know the percentage, but I'll find out one day. Like, what are the percentage of women who are going through this transition who are just really, it's just the hormonal changes. They get on hormones, maybe sort it out once they're getting better sleep, and once you have better sleep and your mind is under control, then you start to make healthier choices and go to the gym because you get more energy, et cetera, et cetera. And then what are the percentage of the women who are just stuck in this emotional eating place? And based on the fact that you're dealing with mostly the women in your community are in this perimenopause transition or post-menopause.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting. Well, why don't you have 20-year-olds when I'm guessing my stereotypical thought is happening in the teenage years or the 20s, right? Where are those women?
Yeah, that's true. I would say that people don't think, again, we think diet first. We think diet and exercise. And that's usually, I mean, that's the accepted solution is diet and exercise. And so my experience is that you have to try that first. And it's the obvious place to go, right? Eat less, exercise more. It's so simple. And so that might work for somebody who's younger. Just start going to the gym and then you can eat what you want and you're fine. And your body does bounce back better than when it's younger. So that's why I don't see a lot of young people. It's more the people who have been struggling for a long time. I do have women come to me in their 40s when their body does start to change hormonally, and they weren't necessarily overweight when they were younger, but they're starting to be. And so it can come on at later years as well. But I think there's just the natural progression where you try the physical solution first. You try the diet, you try the exercise plan, you might try the drug, whatever. But if those things don't work, like you put the weight back on, that's when you start to realize it might be a deeper problem. It might not be so simple as calories in, calories out, or calories burned off. That's when you start to, that's for me at least, that's when I started looking at more emotional solutions and that kind of thing. And again, those didn't necessarily solve it for me, but I was getting closer to the solution when I was looking deeper.
Yeah, so yeah, you do. That's the prescription that doctors aren't making when they see somebody he says, "Oh, you got to lose weight to reverse your prediabetes, or you got to exercise more to get your cardiovascular markers better." They're not really saying, "Hey, let's go deal with your emotions." That's not standard of care.
No, it is not. It is not. And now with the medication, they're still not asking that question. What's your relationship with food? They're just like, let's turn down the food noise. Let's get that weight off. But we still have to have, as part of our plan, we have to have the emotional. And like you also suggested earlier, the stress. Again, I talked about the overdoing. It worries me that people are artificially losing weight with the help of, I say artificially, whatever. I just mean they're doing the physical hack, but they're not addressing how they got that weight on in the first place. And a lot of it is from stress. A lot of it is from overdoing. A lot of it is from trauma from one's past. And they're just staying as busy as they can with as much activity in their life as they can so as to not slow down and let their emotions catch up to them, let their trauma, what might have happened, catch up to them. And so that worries me because stress kills. You can be in a thin body and get a heart attack or a stroke because you're overdoing. You have not allowed yourself to slow down and start taking care of yourself. And that's what I see with emotional eaters is we're terrible at taking care of ourselves. We're terrible about putting self-care as a priority. We're so busy. We're also caretakers. So in my book, Heal Your Hunger, I have something called the anatomy of the emotional eater. The anatomy of the emotional eater And this is 24 personality traits that make up the emotional eater's personality. So it's not just I eat Ben and Jerry's when I'm upset. It is like there's an emotional personality composite. Okay, there's a whole personality trait or number of traits that make up who we are as emotional eaters. This is like really the focus of my work is how we're living. It's not how we're eating. I mean, we're eating how we're eating as a result of how we're living. So caregiving is a big trait of ours is that we're always caring for other people. Well, that's problematic because we're at the end of the list. Like we're the last person who gets any care. And we feel guilty about putting self-care on the list. Like we feel guilty for taking time for ourselves. We're like, no, we're moms, we're daughters, we're workers. We have to be giving all the time. That's what brings us our sense of worth. Well, that's a losing proposition because if we are not taking care of ourselves, if we're not leaving time in the morning to connect with our divine spirit and sort of connect with universal truths that can empower us throughout the day, I call it putting money in your spiritual bank account. Start the day getting connected with yourself. Do not start answering texts. Do not start just going at it at the gym. Like that can come after, but we have to start having a relationship with ourselves, which is lost when we're in that on that hamster wheel of do, care, care, care for other people. And so that really it worries me because we do tend to have a lot of stress in our lives, which of course adds to the problem hormonally. We're screwing up our bodies just by stress alone. And so it's just really important that our solution, whatever it is, be very focused on learning, being retrained, or if trained for the first time, on how, as women, to put ourselves first and put our self-care first, put money in our spiritual bank account so we can take withdrawals throughout the day. Because if we don't, we're leaning on chocolate and coffee and pot gummies to get through.
And wine.
And yeah, and
Yeah.
wine. Exactly. And all these things are not going to help us. They help us in the moment, but they have negative effects.
So, how do you lean into this spiritual self-care, or how does a woman supposed to listen this and think about the menopausal woman too and all the things that she's going, the sandwich generation, she may have older kids at home, taking care of older parents, and it's a lot of stress. And then, of course, you have the hormones changing, and you're asking her to take time for yourself or get in touch with yourself. And I know that can be a really scary place for some people, especially if you're used to caring for others. It must feel really uncomfortable. And how then, where is the first place a woman should start when to look into her own emotions or her own spiritual self? And if
Yeah,
there's a difference too. I mean, I keep saying emotional and spiritual, but maybe you have
yeah.
a different
Well,
plan.
I when I say spiritual, I don't mean religious necessarily. I mean definitely religious if that speaks to somebody, but I mean more of a holistic kind of seeking. I believe we have a divine spirit within us. We all have that still small voice that is prompting us and protecting us and guiding us, but we're running so fast from ourselves that we're not tuning in. When we're not tuning in to that source of comfort and strength. And so what I mean is take time for that. Take time. It's really a relationship with ourselves, with our best selves, or cultivating our best selves. When I'm stressed out and I'm not taking care of myself, I'm bitchy. I'm snappy and bitchy. I'm not my best self. I'm not my best self. I'm overwhelmed. I'm self-pitying because nobody's doing as much as I am. And my thoughts are off the rails of resentment that nobody else is pulling their weight, right? It can really devolve into this horrible mindset. And so I need to cultivate a positive mindset. Like I need to invest in this. The work I do is done mostly in like I have coaches who do one-on-one work with my clients, but we also have a really strong community. So a lot of our calls are in group together and in breakouts on Zoom. Thank God for Zoom and thank God for the pandemic who taught us how to use Zoom. But basically, the community support is so vital because this is really hard to do on our own. And our minds will attack us regarding the self-care conversation. Our minds will be like, don't be selfish. Don't be selfish. Don't put yourself first. But when you're in a community of women who are doing this, it's like the positive reinforcement of realizing, yeah, we need this. It's sort of like a training. We need to be trained to care for ourselves because it's not been our way. And culturally, it's not our way either. Culturally, it's like women are caregivers. That's what we do. And so the community support is really important. So getting with a community where you're being like positively reinforced when you take care of yourself, because you'll get pushback. Like family members will at times call you selfish or like beef about the fact that you're doing something for yourself. So you got to have your backup. Like you got to have people who's like, no, they'll get used to it. They will soon learn that when you take care of yourself, you're nicer to be around. Like they like the relaxed version of you. They like the person that has just taken time to meditate or that taken time for a 10-minute walk. It doesn't have to be a lot of time. And I know as women, we are busy. So we're not talking about a lot of time, but it is intentional time. Like it's not going to just happen. We have to creating time in our schedule. We have to take a lunch break. It's so easy for us to just eat during work, just have our lunch at our workstation, right? And just work and eat. Well, that is no bueno. Take 20 minutes for lunch. Push away from your desk, go outside, right? Bring your lunch with you or just go somewhere peaceful and have some relaxation. Take some time at the end of the day to relax. I mean, so much of the time for emotional eaters is a lot of our worst time is in the late afternoon and evening, nighttime eating. And that's because the stress has built up throughout the day. We need a reset. Otherwise, the chips are our reset. We go into the kitchen. If we don't come home from work and take a time out first before we start making dinner, before we're looking through the mail, if we don't first take a time out and just have a reset, meditation, bath, whatever, shower, maybe even just a little nap, just that time out before you go into the kitchen. Otherwise, we're eating for our time out. We're eating to slow down, to start breathing. It's like we're de-stressing using food. So I'm just suggesting we bypass the kitchen. Mom's got to take a break right now. Mom's got to change in her evening clothes, whatever, black stretchy yoga pants, get out of work clothes. But we have to be intentional about getting those breaks because we'll just keep going if we don't. And the stress really has such a negative impact.
So if we're going to make some time for ourselves and be coming in home from work and doing some self-care, or we probably have to set boundaries and we probably have to not do everything or take on everything. And that's because it's like everybody wants to do all these great self-care things, but how many women have you said, oh, I don't have any time, and they just come rushing in the door because of all the things that they've been doing. And there's no time. I mean, if they took a time to do some yoga, they'd be eating at 10 o'clock at night, and they probably don't want to do that. So you probably teach people now how to set boundaries or other things.
Yeah, you nailed it. It is a whole new way of being. And the thing is, again, just cutting sugar out of your diet, not going to be enough, although a great start. So for feeling better. But yeah, absolutely. So much of what I do, the work that I do is teaching women to start to care for themselves. And that does include, you really nailed it. It includes having conversations, right? Saying, Mom needs this time, or I'm happy to come over and help you, Dad, but I'll be there at such and such a time, instead of drop everything, be in reaction mode and rush over and not even feed yourself. And so boundaries are so important. Being able to say no to a holiday invitation. Like usually we're like, sure. And all of a sudden we've got all these obligations. Let's say, let me get back. Thanks for the invite. Let me get back to you. And then check in with ourselves, look at our schedule. Is this really going to work? Or is this going to add too much stress to my plate? And can I really afford that? Can I afford that? If we don't mind being unconscious and eating through everything, sure, say yes to everything, no problem. But if you want to start making changes and eat healthier, Absolutely, you have to have boundaries on your time. You have to really check in with yourself, and that's hard for emotional eaters because emotional. One of the traits of the anatomy of the emotional eater is that we don't use our voice. We don't speak up for ourselves. We don't stand for ourselves. We tend to other people's needs and not our own. And so we do have to start having uncomfortable conversations. And even conversations like if girlfriends are wanting to go to such and such a place to eat, if it's just goopy, gross Chinese food, gee, I'd rather go to this place. They have better vegetarian options, or there's salads at that place. I'd rather go there. We have to start speaking up for ourselves. And it doesn't have to be in a harsh, militant way. It's just, hey, I'm going to consider my needs here. It would work better for me if we went here to eat. Or I can't eat my lunch at 4 p.m. I'm going to be starving, and that's not going to end well.
Spiral out
So
of control.
yeah,
Yeah.
I need to be intentional about when I get lunch. I need to eat like around 1 instead. Can we change the schedule so that I can eat around 1? Because
Mhm.
I'm a big proponent of 3 meals a day. I call it 3 meal magic. 3 meals with nothing in between, a beautiful way of eating. It's like back to basics. Don't starve yourself. Don't go so long without eating because you're gonna binge. You're just gonna, when you open up that window, you're gonna go to town and then you're gonna feel bad. And it's just the regularity and consistency of 3 meals, which are healthy, good proteins, good fats, slow metabolizing carbs. It's self-caring. It's not a diet. It's like, how would you feed your daughter? Like I often say to people, like, would you say to your daughter, hey, let's not eat for 16 hours because you're going to shave some pounds off? No, that is not self-caring. And I know intermittent fasting is a big deal these days, but it's not a good option for everybody. And if you are somebody who can tend to binge or emotionally eat, it's actually more stabilizing to put 12 hours, like fine, 12 hours between dinner and breakfast, but let's not go too far to where you're starving and you feel like you need to eat the house. Let's just be, again, how would you feed your daughter? Let's just put it in perspective. How would you care for your daughter? You definitely make sure she gets fed 3 times a day.
Exactly. I often tell my clients that just treat yourself like a 5-year-old. Or if you
Yeah,
have kids, you know what it's like to have a 5-year-old. Would you let your 5-year-old stay up on the phone all night? Would you let your 5-year-old
exactly.
skip school? Or what did you let your 5-year-old eat cookies all day? I mean, no. So why not treat yourself like a 5-year-old? And
Totally.
there was a life coach friend of mine, and she taught me it's actually a really interesting technique where you put a picture of yourself as a 5-year-old on your phone, your screensaver. So anytime you have a negative thought, or if you're going to binge eat, I guess, or you look at that phone and you say, would I tell that 5-year-old what I just told myself in my head? And you just try to
I
reverse it. And
love that. I love that.
makes perfect sense. I have so many more questions and I could talk to you forever. You're really interesting. And we never had this topic, but I'm going to have to let you go because we're way over time. We're going to have to get you back on again and answer the rest of my questions.
Thank you. It's been really fun.
It's wonderful. If people want to find you, you've got a book, Heal Your Hunger, The 7 Simple
Yep.
Steps to End Emotional Eating Now. I'm going to have a link to that in the show notes. And you've got an emotional eating breakthrough session. It's complimentary. Is this a free session?
Yeah. So what I recommend is people go to healyourhunger.com and everything is there. My TED Talk's there, my book is there, but also that quiz we talked about. So people can start there by taking that emotional eating quiz, find out what their personalized score is, where they are on the spectrum of emotional eating. And yes, if they take that quiz, there's a good chance they'll be offered the opportunity to have that breakthrough session, which is speaking with myself or one of my coaches just to evaluate where you are on your journey of healing and what your needs are. And if we can help, obviously we'll talk about a solution that we can offer you. But it's complimentary and it can really help somebody get clear on what their needs are for next steps. Because chances are if somebody hasn't gotten to where they want to be weight wise and food wise, getting coached, getting help is so important. We all want to do it alone because there's a bit of shame of, oh, why can't I figure this out? Like it's just cookies for God's sakes. But again, to your point earlier, Zora, you have to eat 3 times a day. You have to deal with your addiction addictive habit and substance. And so getting support, getting community, like I mentioned, being around other emotional eaters who have done crazy things with food, it is so comforting. And it's also part of the healing when you are getting support and getting reflected back how good you are, because we're so mean to ourselves. It can like definitely accelerate the healing.
So you also mentioned the end of January, you having a sugar challenge. I'm wondering if we're,
Yeah.
what
Yeah,
date
I
is
do.
that?
So that is going to happen the last week in January. I believe it's the 27th. And that is a 5-day quit sugar challenge. It's really awesome. We do mindset around quitting sugar because people can want to quit sugar and then there's the emotional piece where they're like, "Oh, don't take my sugar away from me." So we deal with the mindset around giving up sugar, clearing it out of your cupboards, being able to identify the 80 different names for sugar, 80 plus names for sugar, because the manufacturers know how to hide sugar in even healthy products, which keep you physically hooked. So we identify where sugar's hiding in even your healthy foods. And again, in community, we're just letting go. You don't have to quit sugar completely in that week, but you can make a good start. We talk about emotional eating and our emotional connection with sugar. I also give you sweet swaps, like how to still satisfy your sweet tooth, but without eating sugar that's getting you physically hooked. Because I still have a sweet tooth, but I love using natural sweeteners so that I can still satisfy that sweet tooth. So I give you recipes. It's really fun. It's really fun. So you can find out about that on my website, and I also think it's quitsugarchallenge.com as well.
Perfect timing because that's the date that this episode is dropping, January 27th. So
Okay,
it'll
great.
have to hurry and get started
Yeah,
because it starts today. So I'll have a link. You'll send me a link to that in the show notes. And
you bet.
then we can find you on Facebook. You've got a Facebook group and Secret Sauce to End Emotional Eating, and
Yep.
your Instagram, Tricia Nelson. And I got your email as well. Everything's in the show notes. And I'm so grateful that you popped into my life and we had this conversation. I hope it's helped a lot of women out there. And sometimes it isn't menopause. Sometimes it isn't exactly. I mean, the hormones, I always say it's menopause is almost like waking up in the middle of the night and everything's scary and horrible. And then the sun comes out and you're like, oh, okay. It's not as bad. Everything's just exacerbated in the
Right.
night. And
Yeah.
during this period, it may be, yeah, just even more challenging, but you getting to the root cause is pretty important. Are there any last words you'd like to share with a woman going through menopause about emotional eating?
Well, I would again say there's tons of hope, right? You don't have to struggle. You don't have to struggle. There's so much hope. It's not about the food, and you don't need to diet ever again. You can feel in control around food without dieting, even without medication. And to me, it's really hopeful. We heal our hunger, and that's our deeper hunger.
Oh, thank you so much, Trisha, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for having me. It's been great.